welcome to Radcliffe Day 2013. I'm Liz Cohen. I'm Dean of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. Today we gather in the beautifully refurbished Radcliffe Yard to celebrate the Radcliffe community and to honor our Radcliffe medalist, Jane Alexander. We welcome our Radcliffe College alumni, whose intellectual legacy we celebrate in today's Radcliffe Institute, and our fellows whose scholarly and artistic achievements exemplify the transformative work the Institute seeks to promote. Members of our Dean's Advisory and Schlesinger Library Councils and the former Radcliffe College Alumni Association, all here with us today, remind us of the generous support that has ensured Radcliffe's continued flourishing. Members of the Harvard Corporation and governing boards, Harvard Alumni Association president and incoming president, Harvard deans, faculty, administrators, alumni, and students have also joined us from across the university, and many more are with us via live webcast. I am particularly pleased to welcome the Radcliffe Institute's founding dean and Harvard's president, Drew Faust. Stand up. And of course, welcome to Jane Alexander, whose life and career we honor today with the 2013 Radcliffe Medal. And I want to add that Jane Alexander inspired a wonderful panel this morning. Those of you who were there will know what I'm talking about. We called it From Artist to Audience. It was in the Loeb Theater at the ART. It was moderated by Diane Paulus, the artistic director of the ART. I would like to recognize alumni who are marking Radcliffe milestones this afternoon, in particular our reunion classes. Members of the class of 1988 who are celebrating their 25th reunion, the class of 1963 who are celebrating their 50th reunion, and the class of 1943 who are celebrating their 70th reunion. Welcome also to our other reunion classes, 1983, 1978, 1973, 1968, 1958, 1953, and 1948. And here's an amazing part. And congratulations to the earliest classes with representatives here today, the classes of 1939 and 1942. So please join me in welcoming all of our milestone alumni. As we honor the intellectual and artistic successes supported by Radcliffe over the last 134 years, I also want to take a moment to celebrate two important Harvard milestones that had immeasurable effect on women in higher education. First, 2013 marks the 50th anniversary of the first doctoral degrees conferred on women by the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. And second, in 1963, the Harvard Business School accepted its first class of women into the full-time MBA program. Please join me now in a moment of silence as we remember those in the Radcliffe community who are no longer with us. I would like to honor in particular one friend who passed away recently, Jane Rainey Opal, a dedicated supporter of Radcliffe, and many of you, I'm sure, knew her. A member of the class of 1950, Jane manifested her commitment to Radcliffe as a leader of the Radcliffe College Alumni Association, as a member of the Anne Radcliffe Society, and much more. The Jane Rainey Opal Young Alumni Award is named in Jane's honor and given annually by the Radcliffe Shared Interest Group and the Harvard College Women's Center. This year's recipient is Kristen McConnell from the class of 2003. I hope you will consider attending the Opal Award ceremony in the Radcliffe Gym immediately following this luncheon to celebrate Jane's memory and Kristen's achievements. Radcliffe continues to attract original thinkers and creative artists from across Harvard and around the globe. True to our mission, this year we supported a range of faculty-led seminars, workshops, and scholarly initiatives. We brought an intellectually diverse class of fellows to campus to pursue research, writing, and creative endeavors. We continued through the Schlesinger Library the vital work of documenting past and present lives of women in America. We enriched the student experience at Harvard through offering unique research opportunities. And we shared these programs with a broad audience here on campus, around the country through our Radcliffe on the Road series, and via our website. Alongside all of this stimulating intellectual activity, we have been busy preparing for the Radcliffe campaign. For the first time, Radcliffe will be part of a university-wide fundraising campaign that will launch this fall, allowing us to celebrate our role as Harvard's Institute for Advanced Study and to communicate what we do and why it is important. Each of us can play a role in carrying Radcliffe into the future. We take seriously our responsibility as stewards of this storied place in other ways as well. The newly landscaped Radcliffe Yard, the most recent of the major renovations that have occurred across the Radcliffe campus, stands as one testament to our commitment to Radcliffe's history. Our determination to use our inherited resources creatively is another. Let me take a moment to draw your attention to an early leadership gift that endorses Radcliffe's role in promoting intellectual exchange. Sidney Knopfel, a dedicated supporter of Radcliffe from the Harvard College class of 1954, has agreed to serve with our longtime champion, Susan Wallach, as co-chair of the Radcliffe campaign. Sid recently established the $10.5 million Knopfel Fund to support programs at the Radcliffe Institute that bring faculty from across Harvard together with scholars from around the world for exploratory seminars, workshops, and engaging public events. I'm pleased to announce that we have renamed the Radcliffe Gymnasium the Knopfel Center in honor of Sid's generosity. The Knopfel Center serves as a symbol of the convening function of this prominent space in Radcliffe Yard. Sid was unable to join us here today, but please join me, as you have, in thanking him for ensuring that Radcliffe remains a place where new thinking and creative invention can thrive. We hope that you will continue to enjoy the Radcliffe Institute's rich offerings, whether in Cambridge or at home through the internet. And we are grateful for your support, and we look forward to celebrating Radcliffe and the supporters who make all we do possible when we launch the Radcliffe campaign in late October. Radcliffe's public programming promotes the idea that art offers an essential path to intellectual inquiry. For example, this year's Conference on Immigration in the Americas opened with a spectacular performance by Quetzal, a feminist Latina band from East Los Angeles. And you may have noticed as you made your way into the newly restored Radcliffe Yard that we have a new garden space on Brattle Street across from the ART. This year, we launched our first annual student public art competition, which attracted entries from 22 student teams, each vying for the honor of creating an installation for that space. Our winning entry, titled Saturate the Moment, will be constructed this summer, and we're actually going to videotape the construction so we can show that when we unveil it in October. You can visit this, of course, anytime during the year, but I certainly hope you'll be here next year for Radcliffe Day to look at it then. So it's particularly fitting, given all the arts that we have been promoting, given this deep commitment we have to the arts, that our Radcliffe Medalist is a warrior for the arts and an artist herself. We award the Radcliffe Medal annually to an individual whose life and whose work have substantially and positively influenced society. Today, we salute Jane Alexander, this year's distinguished recipient, for both her critically acclaimed acting roles in films, theater, and television, and her passionate advocacy of the arts as head of the National Endowment for the Arts from 1993 to 1997. As an actor, Jane has entertained and challenged us on stage and screen in The Great White Hope, Eleanor and Franklin, Kramer versus Kramer, Testament, and All the President's Men, to name just a few. As an advocate, she has fought to preserve public support for the arts, raising awareness of the critical role that music, dance, drama, painting, sculpture, and photography play in American civic life. On this day, when we celebrate the arts at Radcliffe, we also celebrate the talent and accomplishments of a remarkable woman whose life's work has touched us all. Jane Quigley Alexander grew up not far from here in Brookline, Massachusetts, the oldest of 3 children of a nurse and a surgeon. She made her stage debut in 5th grade at Beaver Country Day School in Treasure Island. Showing her great theatrical range, even then, Jane played Long John Silver. Majoring in theater at Sarah Lawrence College, Jane earned starring roles in many contemporary and classic plays. She spent her junior year abroad at the University of Edinburgh, where she excelled in performances with the university's acclaimed dramatic society. Though Jane admits in her excellent memoir, Command Performance, An Actress in the Theater of Politics, and I quote her, "I didn't get much work done." Jane first gained national acclaim as an actress in 1967 for her role as the white mistress of a turn-of-the-century black heavyweight boxer in a Broadway production of The Great White Hope, a powerful play about race in the Jim Crow era that, it's worth noting, was written by playwright Howard Sackler with support from a newly founded National Endowment for the Arts. Jane and her co-star, James Earl Jones, received Tony Awards for their stage performances and Oscar nominations a year later for their work in the film version. During the busy decades that followed, Jane earned 3 additional Academy Award nominations for her notable roles in All the President's Men, Kramer versus Kramer, and Testament, along with 6 more Tony Award nominations and 8 Emmy nominations and 2 wins for her work in television. Throughout her career, Jane has brought us striking portrayals of memorable real-life women, including Calamity Jane, Georgia O'Keeffe, Hedda Hopper, Eleanor Roosevelt, and several decades later, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, FDR's mother. Jane's acting career developed alongside her career as an activist. Deeply moved by President Kennedy's assassination, Jane became engaged, like many in her generation, in civil rights, human rights, and anti-war protests. After her son Jace was born in 1964, she became increasingly concerned with the dangers of nuclear proliferation, and she joined Women's Action for Nuclear Disarmament. Dr. Helen Caldicott, the head of WAND, urged Jane to speak out on issues she was passionate about. This was advice that Jane never forgot. Jane accepted President Clinton's nomination to head the National Endowment for the Arts in 1993, at a time when federal arts funding had become a hot potato and a lightning rod. Jane chose to address the controversy head-on. At her 1993 confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill, Jane asserted, and I quote her, "I respect the right of people to be heard, the voices of those who are disturbed by art and the voices of the creative community. This, after all, is the greatness of our democratic system. But the arts should not be used as a political football by those on the far right or the far left. The arts are for everyone. The endowment is too important to be misused by some who disseminate misinformation for their own ends or attack the endowment as a campaign platform." During her 4-year tenure at the NEA, Jane, a neophyte in Washington politics, deftly practiced the Beltway survival skills of coalition building, diplomacy, and compromise. She launched the American Canvas, a project to preserve diverse cultural legacies, and she built partnerships with state and local arts councils to deepen and to expand the NEA's constituencies. Jane's tenacious fight to defend the NEA in the power circles of Washington ensured that the agency survived. Perhaps even more importantly, the work she did to highlight and strengthen the endowment's ties to communities across the nation ensured that Americans enjoyed continued access to the arts. From the beginning of her tenure, Jane spent several days a week on the road visiting NEA-supported arts initiatives in all 50 states. From a dance school for low-income kids in South Central Los Angeles, to a Lakota Nations dance circle on a sacred hillside in North Dakota, to a cowboy poetry festival in a small town of Elko, Nevada, her visits underscored the dynamism of the arts everywhere in America. Looking back on her tenure at the NEA, Jane has written, and I quote, "While I had become discouraged with our legislative leaders, I never faltered in my belief about art and the creative minds in America. There is wonderful art to be found all over this great country of ours, art that brings joy, spirituality, ritual, and fun to our lives. If religion teaches us that love is all-encompassing, art teaches us that anything is possible." Jane's work as an actor and as an advocate provides an inspirational model for how one person can raise national consciousness about art's critical role in shaping ideas, building hope, and strengthening communities. Please join me in welcoming the 2013 Radcliffe Medal honoree, Jane Alexander. Jane Alexander, we honor you today with the 2013 Radcliffe Medal for your distinguished contributions in film, theater, and television, your passionate and courageous advocacy for the arts, and your dedication to supporting the arts and artists across America. Save this, we can get this later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liz. President Faust, Dean Cohn, friends, family, alumni, colleagues, I'm really delighted to be here today, and I feel especially honored to receive this Radcliffe Medal, and I will tell you why in a minute. Listening to the outstanding artists this morning in the Loeb Theater, I can feel the importance of this Institute for Advanced Study and what it means to artists and to people in all kinds of walks of life. Well, I'm especially honored by this, more than you'll ever know, and I'm going to tell you why. As Liz Cohen said, I grew up here in Brookline, just a few miles away, and on a place called Pill Hill, because there were many doctors who lived there, and my father was one of them. My dad, Bart Quigley, was an orthopedic surgeon at the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital. It was called Peter Bent back there. And he was also doctor for the Harvard football team. Some of you who are of a certain age may remember the man with the red cap running out onto the field when a player was down. That was my dad, and it was a role he loved, and he adored Harvard. Dad came from North Platte, Nebraska. He was a gifted child who, at the age of 16, was given a scholarship to Harvard. And he came here, and he went on to graduate from the medical school. He met my mom, a scrappy, beautiful nurse from South Boston. They married, and they never gravitated from the sphere of the Boston-Cambridge hub. And neither did I. the first 17 years of my life. And because my mother didn't drive, I negotiated the buses and the trolleys all around Boston. And I made the theaters and the museums part of my rounds from a very, very early age, 12, 13. I marveled at the glass flowers in the Peabody, and I paid regular visits to certain Greek vases in the basement over there at the Art Museum, and I got a good education in eroticism at an early age. As a teenager, I discovered Boys and Eliot House over here, and the theater that was to be had there and in Mem Hall, and also a wonderful place some of you may remember called the Poets Theater. Yes. And there I would hang backstage for a glimpse of talking to somebody like Olympia Dukakis or some of the other wonderful actors there. And I had the great privilege of being in many, many plays at my alma mater, Beaver Country Day School in Brookline, a school that I loved and that had a lot of arts in the curriculum. Well, I knew what I wanted to do by the time I was a teenager, but my dad was adamant. He loved the theater, but he said, "You are going to get a college education. All knowledge will serve you." I hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. I spent 2 intense years at Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York, and then my junior year abroad at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Now, I want you to picture this. For a girl who had nothing but single-sex education from the age of kindergarten, the sight of Scottish lads in their kilts back in the late 50s was tantamount to giving a starving man a table at a 5-star restaurant. The academic year was a tumble-down disaster for me. I became part of a very boisterous international group of students, and we partied with abandon, and we hitchhiked together all over Europe, and we went to Russia together, and we made music together and theater together, and we sowed many wild oats. And I got an education my parents never dreamed of. Then that summer, as the star of a hit Tennessee Williams play in the new Edinburgh Fringe Festival, I said that was it. It's an actor's life for me. And still my dad was adamant. He said, "You are going to finish that last year of college." By this time, I didn't want to go back to Bronxville. It was late August, and Dad said, "I'm going to get you into Radcliffe." I know the president. Maybe he didn't realize I hadn't passed most of my courses in Edinburgh, and it was a little late in the year. Radcliffe was not to be fooled or coerced by this wayward dad and child, and of course I didn't get in. So, Dad was crestfallen. I was chagrined but excited. With $40 in my pocket, I got on a bus to New York, and I never looked back. I never got a college degree, but I did all right. So I thank you, Radcliffe. Thank you for turning me down and starting me on my career. And I thank you also on behalf of my dad, wherever he is, because finally you've made an honest woman of me. How do we find our way in life to any field of endeavor? We find it with luck and the hope that someone will introduce us to possibilities in life. Well, that someone is usually a teacher, a parent, a friend. And after the Second World War in 1945, my dad, who had been away for 5 years in that war, returned home. And in an effort to get to know his little girl, he took me one afternoon to the ballet. That was Coppelia, a Danish ballet company. The Royal Copenhagen Ballet Company was performing here in Boston. He took me to a matinee, and I was, as the Brits say, gobsmacked. I remember sitting there going, oh my God, is this possible? Does this really exist in life? This beauty, this ability for dancers to leap like birds into the air, the colors, the light, the sound, the music. I had no television. All I ever heard was my mother listening to war news on the radio. So that was the beginning. If a child can have an epiphany at age 6, that's what I had. And I said to myself, that's where I want to be, up on the stage. Well, of course, it didn't work out for me to be a dancer. I tried, but it didn't. But the rigors of dance proving a little too hard, I decided to switch into the theater, and as you've heard, playing Long John Silver in the 3rd grade did it. I got a lot of laughs, and I knew that that was going to be possible for me. What had happened to me was that I had experienced in that ballet the promise of what it means to be human, exceeding itself and going into a state of rapture. And when the arts succeed at their very, very best and at their utmost ability to tie intellect and intuition together, that's what happens. And we realize that as a species, we're pretty phenomenal. Now, the performing arts are highly creative arenas of life, but we are all creative beings. And at least we start out that way. I mean, babies are naturals. They're always clapping and rocking, and we encourage that, and we act babyish, and we have a wonderful time. And children are exposed to the arts in primary and elementary school, but then increasingly the arts are cut out as students buckle down to so-called real learning, the stuff that will get them into college and university and then a job, supposedly. Why? Because the arts are perceived as intuitive and cannot be measured in the same way as science or math or even history. In the parlance of Hollywood, they're called soft. And they're the first to go when there are budget cuts, and as we know, there are budget cuts all the time. Even the American Midwest today, which I thought would be the last bastion and holdout with music in the schools, is cutting a lot of their music programs and their bands. We have failed our children, the very wealth of our nation, our children. We have failed them in many areas. They are not achieving in school as many children around the world and other countries are. And the effort now is to institute more learning in the science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM movement, which is a national movement. Maybe this will turn things around, but I have my doubts. It is, in my opinion, our antiquated educational system, K through 12, which needs turning around, not our children. Our children are as facile as children ever were in human history. I mean, all you have to do is watch them negotiate technology. Any new device or app given to them, they seem hardwired to do it. In fact, their brains probably are. It is not the hardware of their brains that needs rethinking, but the software put into them. Psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist wrote a really interesting book some of you may have read a few years ago called The Master and His Emissary, about the brain. He suggests that the left brain, with its predominantly analytical, intellectual, rational order, has been slowly taking over the empathic, intuitive, creative right brain, and that this has been going on since before Socrates. Sneaking in, I guess, like that robot Hal in 2001. McGilchrist does allow that through the centuries there have been spurts of creativity, certainly the Renaissance, the Romantics, and anomalies always. And there's no accounting for genius, ever. Well, a takeover by the left brain may well be happening because now we are processing more information in a day than our ancestors did in 10 years. There was a time when one human brain could contain most of the knowledge of the world. That time has long passed. Today, our communal computers, our global brain holds that knowledge. Knowledge, but not wisdom. Wisdom is experiential and individual. So whether the left brain, the emissary in his title, has triumphed over its master, the right brain, or not, we can all agree, I think, that this age of technology has changed everything. I think it's just astonishing to be alive at this time. The confluence of two rather remarkable events in human history. One is the technological age that we're going through right now, and the other is climate change, which is going to change everything as well. And we hope that technology will solve a lot of those problems, but that's not part of my speech today. Well, we are part of this unfolding story, and we don't have a clear ending. Technology has made the speed with which we communicate an addictive toy, and like any new communication device, from the printing press, radio, or telephone to television and the computer, we are hurling information at each other like children run amok in a sandbox. It is exhilarating and it is sometimes edifying, but I don't think we've passed yet from the information stage and made the leap to creativity and storytelling, despite posting our films and our literature online. If the past is any predicator, however, the leap is about to come. The first stage of any communication device is about dissemination of information and reproduction of information. The invention of the printing press made Luther's Protestant ascendancy possible. Radio gave us war bulletins and weather reports. When TV came along, some in Hollywood predicted it would never advance beyond news because people would not have the patience to sit in front of a small screen. Huh. Pretty soon we're all going to be wearing glasses, and it's going to be right here, a little chip in our glasses so we can watch all the time. So today we miniaturize, but we begin with this information, with gossip, with reproductions, and then one day some creative person, an artist, a creative person in any media, but very often an artist, makes a breakthrough. And stories are told in an original way, and there are new ways of revealing pictures and of sound. 50 years ago, Marshall McLuhan wrote, "The artist picks up the message of cultural and technical challenge decades before its transforming impact occurs. He then builds Noah's arks for facing the change that is ahead." I think we're on the cusp of that breakthrough. And perhaps it will be in the very form itself. Perhaps it will begin, someone might begin to break the frame, the rectangle of the screen that we look at in paintings, in photographs, in television, in movies, that has held us captive, and present us with a new way to see. And I don't just mean 3D. I don't quite know what I mean because it hasn't happened yet. There are holograms, and they're used in the theater to good effect in many respects. But I think this is something else that is going to happen that's going to be cataclysmic. This has not been an easy time for many artists. The technological wizardry of the sciences has dazzled us for so long and dominated our lives with every new invention that many of the arts seem to be in a state of stasis, and a lot of artists have complained to me they don't really know how to move forward or what to do at this point in time. The problems are so huge that the expansiveness of what we have to deal with is very hard for an artist to get a hold of. Although I think many try, and we saw a really good group of artists this morning on the panel who are doing brilliant things. The art critic and the philosopher Arthur C. Danto has even said that we've reached the end of art, meaning not the death of art itself, but the end of the era of art that was vigorous and without internal exhaustion. We are in transition. Einstein, speaking long before McGilchrist's theme of left brain takeover, said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." So it does seem lately that we have largely forgotten or ignored the gift of intuition, the mystery of the unknowable. Our mastery of technology has given us a false sense of dominance over our lives and the lives of everything on the planet. It is the arrogance of our species. We forget that we know a mere 5% of how the brain works, much less the brain of the universe or the brain of a snail. We forget that when an individual dies, we have lost an entire library of experience and wisdom. We forget that we're dependent on all things in nature for balance and a healthy environment. Like players at a poker table, we gamble with it all, believing we are indomitable. If we continue on this path, we will surely become bankrupt. Our brains are better than that, and we are capable of so much more. After all, we're the only species that has put together a 90-piece orchestra to play Beethoven. We can do so much more. Can we help ourselves to experience the intuitive? Can we lift our heads from the small rectangular screens over which we lord and enter into the expansiveness of the unknown? How do we tap into our imaginations and become more creative? Well, as I said, creative, and you've heard it this morning as well, Diane Paulus was talking about that. Creative minds are found in all walks of life. Business leaders, teachers, homemakers, basketball players. We all start with an idea or a hypothesis, and we proceed to ways of testing it. The problem-solving part, the left brain part, we can't work without both parts of our brain. Harvard scientist David Edwards calls this joining of the aesthetic and analytic thinking art science. The creator moves back and forth between dreaming and testing until a decision is made that either a sculpture, say, or a cellular model works. The constraints of the process, what we would call the form of the work, help bringing it into fruition. The arts are more elusive, however, because we cannot put together the ingredients for a successful outcome in quite the same way. The lab, you have charts. The basketball player has game points, and so on. But creativity in the arts is deeply intuitive and is perceived by others in an intuitive way as well. The artist makes a leap of faith with her creation, and she hopes that someone is on the other end to catch it. Robert McNeil, the journalist and writer, captures the process of the artist this way. Any serious work begins as a small seed planted in the soil of lonely confidence. It's a risky business in every way, and there's no guarantee of success, artistically or monetarily. Van Gogh didn't make a dime in his lifetime, and he was a great artist. Classical composers historically peak 50 years after their death. Sorry, Augusta. Unless you are a genius like Mozart, and there's no accounting, as I said, for genius. The story goes that there was this young composer who came to Mozart, and he said he wanted to develop creatively in music, and what should he do? And Mozart said, well, why don't you start with songs? And the composer said, but you didn't start with songs. He said, no, but nobody ever came to ask me how to be a composer. Genius aside, creativity can be encouraged. And exploring the arts is a fabulous way to do it. And first, you can do it this way. You start off with a medium that is right for you with your child. It takes quite a while to find out what medium or mediums you excel in. I love to see the visual arts, but I cannot paint worth anything. I cannot draw a stick figure. But I go out, I can explore human emotion and behavior, and I'm at home there. That's That's my creative home. We each thrive in very different ways, and it's important to find what is important to you in your creative life, in your home. And the second thing is to find a safe place in which to take the risks, to be allowed to fail over and over again on your own terms, because failure is the most exacting teacher and defines your path to success. Businesses are scrambling, as Diane also said this morning on the panel. Businesses are scrambling to find employees who can be productive in this changing world. And they are asking for people who think outside the box. They have established that the qualities that they need for the 21st century are these: collaboration, flexibility, imagination, and innovation. And artists here will certainly recognize that they incorporate these daily in their work. So along with science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM initiative, let's put the arts in there too, putting some S-T-E-A-M, STEAM, into the STEM. Now the Rhode Island, this is an initiative that was started by the Rhode Island School of Design, just south of you here. And I think it's a great idea. Let's give our young people an education which allows them to explore the creativity that they have within each one of them. I applaud President Faust and Dean Cohen for all they're doing here on these campuses to put more arts into the curriculum, because I think that is what we need for the future to find. It's all going to be about niche building and creative niche building in the future. In closing, I would like to thank Radcliffe, most of all, Radcliffe Institute, for this great honor. I would like to acknowledge my loving family here today and my friends. And one person in particular, a mentor of mine who is with us today, whose papers are in the Institute's Schlesinger Library's History of American Women. Faye Chandler came into my life when I was a teenager. She decided that when she was close to 40, and she was almost through with raising 4 children, and raising a wonderful husband too, Al Chandler, economics professor here at Harvard for many, many years. Faye took up painting with the idea that painting would become her prayers as well as her eyes. She had been reading the philosopher Paul Tillich, and he suggested that through prayer, you had to see better, see things more closely. So Faye thought, I will take up painting, which she did. She started with very small paintings. And by, your 80th year or something, triptychs 18 feet long. Faye has had many retrospectives and shows here in Boston, so I'm sure there are many of you who know her well. She learned how to paint, she learned how to see, and she learned how art can become the temple for the soul. Faye was the only artist that I knew in my youth, and she showed me the way. She still does. Bless you, Faye. Stand up, take a bow. Faye turned 90 this year, and she's still working, and I hope that will happen to me too, and I wish that on all of you as well. Happy creative life. Thank you so much.